The mud on my boots was just mud. I was 16 when they decided I was a devil worshipper. Not because I did anything. Because I wore black. That was 1993 in West Memphis, Arkansas, and 3 8-year-old boys had been found murdered in a drainage ditch. Steve Branch, Michael Moore, Christopher Byers. Children. Hog-tied, mutilated, left in the water. The whole town was broken open by it, and when a town breaks open like that, it needs something to pour its grief into. They poured it into me, into Jason Baldwin, into Jesse Miss Kelly. We were the weird kids. That was enough. I'd been reading about Wicca. I listened to Metallica. I wore a trench coat to school in a place where people wore Wranglers and went to First Baptist on Sundays. My name was Damien, which I'd taken from a priest I admired, but every person in that county heard it and thought of the omen. I might as well have handed them the rope myself. The police had nothing. No physical evidence linking us to those boys. No witnesses. No murder weapon. They had a town full of terrified parents and a prosecutor named John Fogelman who needed an answer, and we were the answer he chose. They brought Jesse in first. He was 17 and had a low IQ, and they questioned him for 12 hours without a lawyer, without his parents, without food, and somewhere in that long hungry room he told them what they wanted to hear. He said we did it. He said we killed those boys in a satanic ritual. His confession was riddled with errors, wrong times, wrong details, things that didn't match the evidence at all, but it didn't matter. Once he said our names, we were finished. I want you to understand what the satanic panic was, because if you didn't live through it you might think it sounds like something out of a history book that couldn't possibly happen. It wasn't history. It was television. It was Geraldo Rivera doing specials about secret cults operating in every American suburb, daycare workers accused of ritualistic abuse, communities convinced that Satan had set up an operational headquarters in their neighborhood. Therapists were pulling recovered memories out of children that never happened. Innocent people were going to prison across the country on nothing but hysteria and suggestion. West Memphis was not an exception. West Memphis was just more honest about what it was doing. At my trial, the prosecution brought in a man named Dale Griffiths who had a mail-order doctorate in occult investigation. He testified that my black clothing, my journals, the Stephen King novels on my shelf, the way I'd drawn an ink on my notebook all of it was consistent with satanic cult activity. The defense objected. The judge allowed it. The jury believed it. I was 18 years old and they sentenced me to death. Jason got life without parole. Jesse got life plus 40 years. His confession, the one full of errors, the one given after 12 hours without counsel, was the only thing tying us to those murders. I spent 18 years on death row in the Tucker unit. I won't tell you it makes you strong because that's something people say to make suffering sound useful. What it does is make you very still inside. You learn to live in your head because your body belongs to the state. You read. You meditate. You write letters. You watch the appeals go in and come back denied, and you do it again, and you keep doing it because stopping means agreeing that you deserve to be there. On the outside, something was happening that I didn't fully understand until much later. People were fighting for us. Documentary filmmakers named Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky made a film called Paradise Lost. They went in expecting to document the story of 3 guilty boys and they came out certain we were innocent. The film ran on HBO and something shifted. Celebrities started paying attention. Johnny Depp. Eddie Vedder. Henry Rollins. People with money and platforms who could amplify what lawyers alone could not. New forensic analysis was done on the victim's wounds. The original pathologist had said the mutilation was consistent with a knife used in a ritual. The new forensic experts said the wounds were consistent with animal activity post-mortem. With teeth. Likely a snapping turtle. That single finding dismantled the entire foundation of satanic ritual abuse the prosecution had built its case on. There was no ritual. There was no mutilation at the time of death. The most lurid, most terrifying piece of evidence against us was a turtle. DNA testing came next. DNA from the crime scene was tested, and it matched neither me, nor Jason, nor Jesse. It matched Terry Hobbs. Terry Hobbs was the stepfather of one of the victims, Steve Branch. He was also a man with a history of violence who had never been seriously investigated because the police had decided, very early on, that we were responsible, and once you decide that, you stop looking. Terry Hobbs was never charged. I want you to sit with that. In 2011, after 18 years, the state of Arkansas offered us an Alford plea. An Alford plea means you plead guilty while maintaining your innocence. You say, I acknowledge the state has enough evidence to potentially convict me, but I did not do this. It's a legal fiction. It's how a state gets rid of a case it no longer believes in without admitting it destroyed 3 lives on no evidence and a dead town's need for a monster. We took it. We walked out of prison. Jason wept. Jesse said he just wanted to eat a real meal. I stood in the parking lot and looked at a sky I hadn't stood freely under since I was a teenager, and I felt nothing coherent, just wind. People ask me if I'm angry. I am. I'm angry in a way that has no shape, because the anger has nowhere to land. John Fogelman became a judge. The detectives who interrogated Jesse kept their pensions. Dale Griffiths, the mail-order occult expert, faced no professional consequences. No one was held responsible. The system that did this to us didn't crack or apologize or reform. It just moved on to the next case. What I want people to take from this is not the drama of it. The documentaries do the drama. What I want them to take is how ordinary it was. Nobody in West Memphis thought they were doing something wrong. They thought they were protecting their children. The prosecutor thought he was getting justice for 3 murdered boys. The jury thought they were reading evidence clearly. The Satanic Panic wasn't a conspiracy. It was a consensus. A whole community looked at grief and fear and decided that the strange kid who read the wrong books was the safest place to put it. That is not a historical anomaly. That is a human tendency. And the only thing standing between that tendency and another Jesse Miss Kelly in another interrogation room is whether anyone in the room has the courage to say, wait, let's slow down, let's look at what we actually have. Nobody said that in 1993. The detectives didn't say it. The lawyers didn't say it. The judge didn't say it. The jury certainly didn't say it. They all moved forward with what they needed to be true. The 3 boys who died in that ditch have never gotten justice. That is the part that keeps me up. I got out. Jesse got out. Jason got out. But the actual killer, whoever it was, and the DNA evidence points somewhere specific even if the state refused to follow it, that person walked free in 1993 and has been free ever since. The investigation ended when they arrested us. It never started again. 3 murdered children and 33 years later, nobody has been charged. I'm not a symbol. I'm not a cautionary tale. I'm a person who was a teenager who liked music that scared his neighbors and who went to prison for it while a real murderer went home. But I am telling you this because symbols are sometimes what it takes. If Paradise Lost hadn't been made. If those people hadn't watched it and cared. If the Innocence Project and new forensic science and DNA hadn't existed. I would have been executed. The state of Arkansas would have killed me, and most people would have nodded and said justice was served, and somewhere a turtle would have kept it secret. I read constantly now. I got married. I live in a house where I can open the door and walk out of it whenever I want to. Every single time I do that I am aware of what it is. There are people still in prison right now that the system decided to be certain about. People whose evidence was thin and whose clothes were the wrong color and whose music was too loud and whose religion was too unfamiliar. They don't all have documentaries. They don't all have celebrities fighting for them. Most of them just have the same stillness I learned to carry. The same letters going out and coming back. The same sky they haven't stood under freely in years. I got lucky. That's all it was. I got lucky, and 3 little boys never did, and the person responsible is probably still somewhere out there, and that fact is the one I can never put down.